In the hushed corridors of Windsor Castle, where centuries of royal history whisper through ancient stone, a different kind of silence has descended. It is the silence that comes not from peace, but from collective breath held in anticipation. 5 minutes ago, the world changed for the Princess of Wales, and with her, for millions who have watched her journey through the most harrowing chapter of her public life. The morning began as mornings at Adelaide Cottage often do, with the sound of children preparing for school and the quiet rituals of family life that Catherine has fought so fiercely to preserve. Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis moved through their routines, perhaps unaware that across the grounds, in rooms where decisions of state are made, royal physicians were gathering for a consultation that would soon ripple across the globe. The medical team, led by specialists whose names are guarded as carefully as state secrets, had been monitoring developments that even the most optimistic among them had not dared to predict. Catherine, the Princess of Wales, has been undergoing treatment for cancer since early in the year 2024. Her diagnosis, revealed to the world in a video message that showed both her vulnerability and her strength, marked a turning point not just in her life but in how the modern monarchy confronts personal crises. She spoke then with a clarity that cut through speculation, explaining that what had been thought to be a routine matter had revealed something far more serious. The preventative chemotherapy she would undergo, she told us, would be long and difficult. What she did not say, what perhaps she could not have known, was how this journey would test not just her body, but the very foundations of royal duty and personal resilience. The months that followed were marked by carefully managed appearances and longer absences. At Trooping the Colour in June, Catherine appeared on the Buckingham Palace balcony, her presence both a reassurance and a reminder of the battle being waged behind closed doors. The crowds that day saw what they wanted to see, a princess recovering, a future queen regent standing strong. But those who looked closer saw the subtle signs. The way she held herself, the moments when the smile seemed to require effort, the protective stance of Prince William beside her. Wimbledon in July brought another public appearance, this time in the royal box at the tournament she has patronized with such genuine passion. The standing ovation she received was not merely for her presence, but for what her presence represented. Here was a woman who had every reason to withdraw, to shelter herself from the scrutiny that comes with every royal engagement, choosing instead to show herself, to be seen. The daughter she brought with her, Princess Charlotte, sat close, a small hand sometimes reaching for her mother's, a gesture of connection that cameras captured and the world cherished. But between these moments of visibility stretched long weeks of quiet. The daily battle with treatment, the side effects that no amount of royal privilege can fully shield against, the intimate struggles that happen far from any camera's lens. In the privacy of Adelaide Cottage, away from the formality of palace life, Catherine faced mornings when rising from bed required courage, afternoons when the children's laughter was both joy and reminder of what she was fighting for, evenings when William's presence was the anchor keeping her steady. The medical team watching over her included some of Britain's most distinguished oncologists, specialists whose expertise has been honed over decades of research and practice. They met regularly, reviewing scans and blood work, adjusting protocols, always searching for the delicate balance between aggressive treatment and quality of life. In these meetings, Catherine was not the Princess of Wales, but a patient, her case discussed with the same rigor and care that would be given to anyone facing similar circumstances. Yet they could not help but be aware that their patient was also a mother of 3 young children, a future queen consort, and a woman whose health had become a matter of national concern. The turning point came quietly, as such things often do. A scan that showed something unexpected, results that prompted immediate consultation. Phone calls made in the early morning hours, voices kept low and controlled, even as hearts raced with implications not yet fully understood. The team knew that what they were seeing required careful interpretation, that jumping to conclusions could be as dangerous as missing what was right before them. They gathered data, compared findings, consulted with specialists in other fields, whose expertise might shed light on what the images revealed. By the time the sun rose over Windsor on this particular morning, a consensus had begun to form. The unexpected turn that had appeared in Catherine's latest results was not what anyone had anticipated at this stage of treatment. The protocols that had been established, the careful roadmap of recovery that had been laid out, would need to be reconsidered. Not abandoned, not necessarily, but examined anew in light of information that changed the landscape of her care. In a room where portraits of long-dead monarchs gazed down from gilt frames, where the weight of history pressed close with every breath, the decision was made to inform the princess immediately. She had been clear from the beginning that she wanted transparency about her condition, that she would not be shielded from difficult truths in the name of protecting her. William was summoned from a meeting regarding his Earthshot Prize initiative, the call interrupting discussions of environmental policy with news that made such matters suddenly seem distant and abstract. The moment they told her, Catherine's first question was about the children. Catherine herself sat in the private sitting room at Adelaide Cottage, the same room where she had filmed her diagnosis announcement months earlier. The morning light streamed through windows that looked out on grounds where her children played, where family life unfolded with as much normalcy as possible given the extraordinary circumstances of their existence. William sat beside her, their hands clasped in a gesture that spoke of partnership forged over years of facing challenges together. The doctors had been thorough in their explanation, neither sugarcoating nor catastrophizing, presenting facts and options with the professional clarity that allowed Catherine to process information without being overwhelmed by it. The unexpected turn, they explained, was not necessarily negative. In fact, the scans and blood work suggested something that had not been anticipated at this stage of her treatment. The markers they had been monitoring showed changes that could indicate her body was responding to the chemotherapy in ways that exceeded their initial projections. It was too early to use words like remission, too early to declare victory over an enemy that has humbled medicine's greatest minds. But it was also impossible to ignore that something significant had shifted, that the trajectory they had been following might be bending toward hope rather than extending uncertainty. Catherine listened with the same focused attention she brings to every briefing, every engagement, every moment when duty requires her full presence. But this was different. This was her life, her future, her children's mother, and her husband's partner. The questions she asked were precise, cutting through medical terminology to the heart of what these findings meant. Could they be certain? What were the next steps? How long before they would know more? And always, underlying every query, the unspoken question that any parent facing serious illness must ask: how much time do I have with them? The medical team's answers were measured, as they had to be. Oncology is a field of probabilities and possibilities, not certainties. But the cautious optimism in their voices was unmistakable, a shift in tone that both William and Catherine recognized immediately. The scans showed tumor markers decreasing more rapidly than the standard protocols would predict. The side effects Catherine had been experiencing, while difficult, were potentially indicators that the treatment was working aggressively against the cancer cells. There were more tests to run, more consultations to conduct, but the initial findings suggested that her body might be winning this fight sooner than anyone had dared to hope. In the hours that followed this revelation, calls were made to family members who had been pillars of support throughout Catherine's treatment. Her parents, Carol and Michael Middleton, received the news with the relief of people who had been holding their breath for months. They had been frequent visitors to Adelaide Cottage, helping with the children, providing the kind of practical support that transcends class and circumstance. A grandmother making tea, a grandfather reading bedtime stories. These ordinary acts had been lifelines in a time when normalcy itself seemed precious and fragile. Prince Harry, reached at his home in California, responded with concern that transcended the well-documented tensions within the family. Whatever rifts have developed over recent years, illness has a way of clarifying what matters. The call was brief but genuine, a brother asking about his sister-in-law, putting aside other considerations in the face of news that reminded everyone that some things are more important than grievances. Whether this represents a thawing in family relations or simply a moment of shared humanity remains to be seen, but those close to the situation noted it as significant nonetheless. Princess Anne, known for her no-nonsense approach to both royal duty and family matters, sent a message that was characteristically direct and supportive. She had visited Catherine several times during treatment, conversations between two women who understand the particular pressures of royal life from different generational perspectives. Anne's own experience with the relentless scrutiny that comes with being born into the Windsor family had given her insights that she shared freely, advice about maintaining boundaries and protecting what matters most even when privacy seems impossible. As the day progressed toward evening, the children returned from school, unaware that this day had been different from all the others before it. Catherine greeted them at the door as she always did, listening to stories about lessons and playground dynamics, helping with homework and settling minor disputes. William watched from the kitchen doorway, struck as he often was by his wife's ability to compartmentalize, to be fully present for the children even when carrying information that would make lesser people crumble. This, he thought, was the strength that no title could confer and no crown could signify, the quiet courage of simply continuing when continuation requires everything you have. The medical conference room at the London clinic, where some of Britain's most complex cases are discussed and debated, had become familiar territory for the team treating Catherine. On this particular evening, as the city beyond the windows settled into its twilight rhythm, the specialists gathered once more to review the latest findings and determine the path forward. The unexpected turn that had emerged in Catherine's scans had prompted this emergency consultation, bringing together expertise from multiple disciplines to examine the evidence from every angle. Dr. Helena Ashworth, one of the country's leading oncologists with 3 decades of experience treating cancer patients, led the discussion with her characteristic blend of rigor and humanity. She had treated members of Parliament and cab drivers with the same meticulous care, believing that medicine at its best serves the person before it, not the position they hold. But she was also aware that her current patient was not just any person, that decisions made in this room would eventually face scrutiny from a public hungry for information and quick to second-guess medical judgment. The scans displayed on the large monitors showed cross-sections of Catherine's body, images rendered in shades of gray that to trained eyes told a story of cellular battle. The tumors that had been identified during her initial diagnosis and surgery appeared smaller, their borders less defined, suggesting that the chemotherapy protocol was achieving its intended effect. But it was the rate of this reduction that had caught the team's attention, a pace of response that fell outside the typical range they would expect at this stage of treatment. Dr. Ashworth walked the team through the timeline, comparing current images with those taken at various points over the past months. The progression was visible even to less experienced eyes, a clear trend toward diminishment that raised both hope and questions. In oncology, unexpected good news must be examined as carefully as bad, because cancer is a disease of deception, capable of appearing to retreat while actually regrouping. The team needed to understand whether what they were seeing represented genuine response or a temporary fluctuation that might reverse with time. The debate that unfolded was technical and nuanced, specialists weighing in from their particular areas of expertise. The radiologist pointed out subtle changes in tissue density that could indicate dying cancer cells. The pathologist raised questions about whether the original biopsy results might have missed indicators that would explain this accelerated response. The immunologist wondered aloud whether Catherine's own immune system might be contributing to the treatment's effectiveness in ways that standard protocols did not account for. Through it all, Dr. Ashworth maintained focus on the central question: what did this mean for Catherine's treatment going forward? The protocol they had established was based on certain assumptions about how her cancer would respond. If those assumptions no longer hold, continuing the same course might mean subjecting her to chemotherapy she no longer needed, with all its attendant side effects and risks. But stopping treatment prematurely could allow any remaining cancer cells to regrow, potentially more aggressively than before. The decision they reached after hours of discussion was characteristically medical in its caution. They would recommend additional testing, more detailed scans that could provide finer resolution of what was happening at the cellular level. Blood work would be repeated to confirm that the tumor markers they had been tracking were indeed declining. And most importantly, they would schedule a consultation with Catherine and William to discuss these findings and explore options together. Medicine, Dr. Ashworth believed, was a partnership between physician and patient, especially when the path forward was unclear. Back at Adelaide Cottage, Catherine and William were navigating their own analysis of what the day's revelations meant. The children were in bed, the house settled into the quiet that comes after the chaos of bedtime routines. In the kitchen, over tea that had gone cold without being drunk, they talked through scenarios and possibilities. William, whose training in search and rescue had taught him to analyze risk and plan for contingencies, wanted to understand every option, every potential outcome. Catherine, more intuitive in her approach, was trying to feel her way toward the right decision, to listen to what her body was telling her about what it needed. The conversation ranged from medical details to practical considerations about how any changes in treatment might affect the family's schedule. There were engagements planned for the coming months, appearances that had been carefully calibrated to allow Catherine to participate without overextending herself. If the news was as positive as it seemed, would she be able to take on more? Should she? Or was this precisely the moment to resist the pressure to return to full duties, to give her body the time and space it needed to fully heal? They talked about the children, always the children. George, at 11 years old, was old enough to understand that his mother had been ill, though they had shielded him from the full weight of her diagnosis. Charlotte, at 9, had shown her concern through small gestures, drawings left on Catherine's bedside table, and offers to help with tasks she knew her mother found difficult. Louis, just 6, accepted his mother's reduced presence with a child's adaptability, but they had seen how he clung more tightly during bedtime, how he asked when things would be normal again. William spoke about the conversation he'd had with his father earlier in the day, how Charles had shared insights from his own ongoing treatment. The king had been characteristically stoic about his diagnosis, maintaining his schedule of duties even as he underwent chemotherapy. But in private conversations with his son, Charles had been more open about the toll it took, the days when maintaining royal composure required reserves of strength he wasn't sure he possessed. His advice to William had been simple: let Catherine lead, follow her instincts about what she could handle, resist the institutional pressure to rush her recovery for the sake of appearances. As midnight approached, they made their way upstairs, past rooms where their children slept unaware of the adult concerns that filled the house. In their own room, Catherine stood at the window looking out over grounds bathed in moonlight. William came to stand beside her, his arm around her shoulders, both of them silent, with thoughts too complex for easy expression. They had faced challenges before, moments when the scrutiny of public life seemed unbearable, when the demands of duty conflicted with personal desire. But nothing had prepared them for this, for the vulnerability that comes with serious illness, for the way it strips away pretense and leaves only what is essential. Catherine spoke quietly about fear, about the nights when she woke gripped by anxiety about leaving her children motherless, about not seeing them grow up. She talked about the anger she sometimes felt, at the unfairness of being struck down in the prime of life, at the randomness that gave her cancer while others remained healthy. And she spoke about hope, fragile and persistent, the possibility that maybe, just maybe, this unexpected turn meant she would be here after all, would see George become king, would dance at Charlotte's wedding, would meet grandchildren she had feared she might never know. William listened as he had learned to listen over months of treatment, without trying to fix or minimize, simply bearing witness to her experience. When she finished, he told her what he had told her many times before, that whatever came, they would face it together, that she was not alone in this fight, that their family would endure because she had made them strong enough to endure. It was not eloquence, but it was truth. And in the darkness of their room, truth was what they both needed most. Dawn broke over Windsor with the kind of clarity that makes everything seem possible. Catherine woke early as had become her habit during treatment, her body's rhythms disrupted by medication and anxiety. But this morning felt different, lighter somehow, as if the news from the previous day had lifted a weight she had been carrying so long she had forgotten what it felt like to be without it. She lay still for a moment, taking inventory of how she felt, the constant assessment that becomes second nature when illness makes the body unfamiliar territory. In the kitchen, she made coffee and stood at the counter watching the grounds emerge from shadow as the sun climbed higher. The normalcy of the moment struck her. The simple domesticity of morning routine in a house where future monarchs slept and trained protection officers maintained discreet watch. This was what she had been fighting for, not the grand occasions and state duties, but these quiet mornings, the chance to be present for the small moments that make up a life. William found her there, wrapped in the robe she favored, her hair unstyled, looking more like any wife and mother than the Princess of Wales. They had weathered storms before, the two of them, from the intense media scrutiny of their early relationship to the challenges of raising children in the public eye. But this had been different, more fundamental, a threat that made other concerns seem trivial by comparison. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder, and they stood together watching the day begin. The children's arrival brought the usual chaos, questions about breakfast and missing school items, small dramas that required parental intervention. Catherine moved through the morning routine with practiced efficiency, pouring cereal and signing permission slips, braiding Charlotte's hair, and reminding George about his football kit. To an observer, it would have seemed entirely ordinary, a family preparing for a school day like millions of others across the country. But underneath the normalcy ran a current of gratitude, an awareness that these ordinary moments were precious precisely because they had seemed uncertain. After the children departed for school, Catherine and William prepared for the day's scheduled consultation at the London clinic. The protection officers who would accompany them had been briefed, routes planned to minimize public exposure, arrangements made to ensure privacy. Even the most routine medical appointments had become logistical operations when you were the future king and queen, every movement coordinated and secured. It was one of the prices of their position, the loss of anonymity even in moments of personal vulnerability. The drive into London took them through streets waking to commerce and commuting, past people going about their lives unaware that the woman in the vehicle passing them was facing decisions that would shape her future. Catherine watched the city unfold beyond tinted windows, thinking about the millions of people who were also dealing with cancer, who faced similar consultations without the resources and expertise available to her. She had spoken in her diagnosis announcement about solidarity with others walking this path, and she felt that connection now, a shared experience that transcended privilege and position. At the London clinic, they were ushered through private entrances to consultation rooms that had hosted countless difficult conversations. Dr. Ashworth greeted them with professional warmth, the kind that acknowledges the gravity of the situation without drowning in it. She had brought members of her team, specialists who could address specific questions and provide technical expertise. But she began by asking Catherine how she was feeling, not as a patient but as a person, an acknowledgement that medical data told only part of the story. Catherine's response was characteristically thoughtful, describing not just physical symptoms but emotional states, the complex mixture of hope and fear that accompanied any news about her treatment. She talked about the children, about wanting to make decisions that gave her the best chance of being there for them in the long term, even if that meant enduring more difficult treatment in the short term. William added his perspective. His questions focused on understanding risks and benefits, on making informed choices rather than decisions driven by fear or wishful thinking. Dr. Ashworth laid out the findings methodically, using images and charts to illustrate what the medical team had observed. The tumor markers, she explained, were declining at a rate that suggested the chemotherapy was being particularly effective. The scan showed visible reduction in tumor size with no evidence of new growth or spread to other areas. These were all positive indicators, signs that Catherine's body was responding well to treatment. But here the doctor's tone became more cautious. They needed to be careful about declaring victory prematurely. The recommendation was to continue with the current chemotherapy protocol for at least 2 more cycles while conducting more frequent monitoring. This would allow them to confirm that the positive trend was continuing and not a temporary fluctuation. If the next round of tests showed sustained improvement, they could begin discussing transition to maintenance therapy, or in the best-case scenario, cessation of active treatment with regular monitoring. But rushing to stop treatment now when things were going well could be exactly the wrong move. Catherine listened to this assessment with visible relief mixed with frustration. Part of her wanted to be done with chemotherapy, to put this chapter behind her and return to normal life. But the rational part understood what Dr. Ashworth was saying, that patients now could make the difference between temporary improvement and lasting recovery. She asked about side effects, about managing the continued treatment while trying to maintain some level of public engagement. Could she take on more appearances? Should she continue to limit her schedule as severely as she had been? The doctor's advice was nuanced, suggesting that Catherine could gradually increase her activities while remaining attuned to her body's signals. Some engagement with normal life could actually be therapeutic, providing purpose and normalcy that aided emotional well-being, which in turn supported physical healing. But it had to be carefully calibrated, not pushed too hard or too fast. The goal was sustainable recovery, not heroic gestures that depleted her reserves. William asked about long-term prognosis, the question that had been hovering over the entire conversation. Dr. Ashworth chose her words carefully, explaining that while the current trends were very encouraging, cancer treatment operated in probabilities rather than certainties. If the positive response continued, Catherine's chances of long-term survival and eventual cure were significantly better than they had appeared at diagnosis, but they would need months, possibly years, of monitoring to be confident that the cancer had been fully defeated. The conversation extended for over an hour, covering details of treatment schedules and monitoring protocols, discussing potential side effects and management strategies. Throughout it all, Catherine and William took notes, asked questions, sought clarity on points that would inform their decisions. This was their approach to challenges, thorough and methodical, gathering information and weighing options before committing to a course of action. It had served them well in navigating royal life, and they applied the same principles now to what might be the most important decision they would ever make. As the consultation concluded, Dr. Ashworth offered something she rarely gave to patients: personal encouragement. She had been impressed, she said, by Catherine's strength throughout this ordeal, by her willingness to be open about her diagnosis and her determination to maintain as much normalcy as possible for her children. These qualities, the doctor believed, were as important to recovery as any medical intervention. The mind and body worked together in healing, and Catherine's mental resilience was a genuine asset in her fight against cancer. The decision about when and how to inform the public about Catherine's unexpected turn weighed heavily on everyone involved. In the age of instant communication and relentless media scrutiny, controlling the narrative around royal health was nearly impossible. Yet there was also a responsibility to manage information carefully, to avoid creating false hope or unnecessary panic. The team that managed communications for the Prince and Princess of Wales gathered to discuss strategy, weighing the public's right to know against the family's right to privacy. The precedent set by both Catherine and King Charles in announcing their cancer diagnoses publicly had marked a significant shift in how the royal family handled such matters. Previous generations had maintained strict privacy around health issues, releasing only the most basic information. But Catherine had chosen transparency, understanding that her position made speculation inevitable and that honest communication was preferable to rumor and conjecture. Now, with positive developments to report, the question was how to share this news in a way that was truthful without being premature. The statement that was eventually crafted reflected this delicate balance. It would acknowledge that recent tests had shown encouraging results, that Catherine's response to treatment had exceeded initial expectations, but that she remained under medical care and would continue chemotherapy as recommended by her doctors. It would thank the public for their overwhelming support and understanding during this challenging time and request continued privacy as treatment proceeded. Most importantly, it would be released in Catherine's own words, maintaining the personal tone she had established with her diagnosis announcement. Before any statement went public, there were calls to make, people who deserved to hear the news directly. Catherine spoke with her parents first, hearing her mother's tears of relief through the phone, her father's gruff expression of joy. She called her siblings, Pippa and James, who had been sources of quiet support throughout her treatment, visiting regularly and helping maintain normalcy for the children. Each conversation was brief but emotional, acknowledgement that while the journey was far from over, the path ahead looked more hopeful than it had. The palace machinery that manages royal communications began its work, preparing for the statement's release and the media response that would inevitably follow. Press officers briefed key journalists, providing background context that would help reporting remain accurate and responsible. The goal was to inform without inflating, to share good news while tempering it with the reality that cancer treatment is a marathon, not a sprint. When the statement was finally released, the response was immediate and overwhelming. Social media erupted with messages of support and celebration, hashtags trending within minutes as people around the world reacted to the news. In Britain, where Catherine's diagnosis had struck a particular chord, the response was especially emotional. She had become, through her openness about her illness, a symbol of courage in the face of adversity, and her improving health felt like a collective victory. The mainstream media coverage was extensive but, for the most part, responsible. Headlines spoke of encouraging signs and positive developments rather than declaring her cured. Medical experts were interviewed to provide context, explaining what the news meant and what challenges remained. There was genuine warmth in much of the coverage, a sense that the nation had been holding its breath and could now exhale slightly, even if complete relief remained premature. At Adelaide Cottage, Catherine watched some of this coverage with mixed feelings. She was grateful for the support, genuinely moved by the outpouring of good wishes from strangers who felt connected to her journey. But she was also aware of the pressure such attention created, the expectation that she would now rapidly return to full duties, the impatience for her to be back to normal. She understood that for many people, her recovery represented hope for their own struggles, and she took that responsibility seriously. But she also knew she needed to protect her healing, to resist the pull to do too much too soon. William fielded calls from family members and friends, managing the influx of well wishes while also trying to maintain some semblance of routine. He had a full schedule of engagements in the coming weeks, commitments made months ago that now needed to be honored. The balance between supporting Catherine and fulfilling his own duties had been precarious throughout her treatment, and it remained so now. He drew strength from the knowledge that she was improving, that the worst fears that had haunted his sleepless nights might not come to pass. The children, told that their mother's doctors were very pleased with how the medicine was working, responded with uncomplicated joy. George asked if this meant she would be able to come to his school football match next week. Charlotte wanted to know if they could plan a family trip, something to look forward to when treatment was complete. Louis, in the direct way of young children, simply asked if his mummy was going to die. Catherine pulled him close, promising that she was fighting very hard to be here for him, that the doctors were helping her get better, that while she couldn't make promises about things no one could control, she could promise that she loved him more than anything in the world. That evening, after the children were in bed and the house had settled into silence, Catherine and William sat together in the sitting room where this journey had begun, with her diagnosis announcement months earlier. They talked about how much had changed since that day, how they had navigated challenges they never imagined facing. They acknowledged the fear that still lurked beneath the surface, the knowledge that cancer is a cunning enemy that can return when you least expect it. But they also talked about gratitude for medical care that was giving her a fighting chance, for family and friends who had supported them, for the small mercies of children's laughter and ordinary days. Catherine spoke about what she wanted to do with whatever time she had been given, how this experience had clarified what mattered most. She wanted to be present for her children, to see them grow and help guide them through the unique challenges of their position. She wanted to continue her work on early childhood development, the cause that had become her passion and that seemed even more important now. And she wanted to use her experience to help others facing cancer, to advocate for better support, and to break down the stigma that still surrounded the disease. William listened, adding his own reflections about how his perspective had shifted. The duties that had once seemed so important now felt less urgent than the moments he spent with his family. The engagements and obligations would always be there, but his children would only be young once, and Catherine's recovery, however hopeful, was not guaranteed. He had learned to prioritize differently, to protect family time with the same intensity he once reserved for royal responsibilities. As the night deepened, they sat in companionable silence, both aware that tomorrow would bring new challenges, new decisions to make, new balancing acts to perform. But for tonight, they had this moment, this quiet space where they could simply be together, not as future king and queen, but as husband and wife, parents and partners, two people who had weathered a storm and could see, however distantly, the possibility of calmer waters ahead. Thank you for watching this documentary on the Princess of Wales's health journey. If this story moved you, please share it with others who might find strength in Catherine's courage. Subscribe to our channel for updates on this developing story and other royal news. Leave your messages of support in the comments below. Together, we stand with Catherine and all those fighting similar battles. Until next time, stay informed and stay hopeful.